Yes, I admit that was a very provocative title I chose. There may be people out there who can't make sense of anything that is happening in the world right now, and they're beginning to question their own judgments. I don't want to leave anybody hanging who doesn't have the attention span to get to the end, so I don't want to bury the lead. The last judgment of God is that we are all innocent. That, by the way, was God's first judgment, and it was his judgment in every moment in between the first and the last. But what the last judgment really is all of us accepting God's judgment of us. That's actually a very long and involved process. Here's two passages from A Course in Miracles to explain. Quote, "The last judgment is generally thought of as a procedure undertaken by God. Actually, it will be undertaken solely by the sonship with my help. It is a final healing rather than a meting out of punishment, however much you may think punishment is deserved. Punishment as a concept is in total opposition to right-mindedness. The aim of the final judgment is to restore right-mindedness to you." Here's another one. Quote, "We have repeated several times before that you but make a journey that is done. For oneness must be here. Whatever time the mind has set for revelation is entirely irrelevant to what must be a constant state, forever as it always was, forever to remain as it is now. We merely take the part assigned long since and fully recognized as perfectly fulfilled by him who wrote salvation's script, in his Creator's name, and in the name of his Creator's Son." End quote. So those of us who believe what A Course in Miracles is telling us believe we know how this world will end, in laughter, and we take great comfort in that. It allows us the grace to refrain from pointing fingers, saying that this mess is happening because of this or that person's ill intent, because we know already that if we remember more often to admit to ourselves that we are indeed projecting the world we see out in front of us, and that life really is just a stage, and men and women merely the players, then we realize it has nothing in it which we must fear. It's all an inside job, or in horror movie terms, the enemy is inside the house. There's a sign I'm used to seeing at protests. If you're not angry, you're not paying attention. I imagine that this is to scold other people for not paying attention to what is happening in the world around them. Those people they're scolding are probably not paying attention to the protests, so they're probably not seeing the sign. But for me, it begs the question, which I ask of the person who is bearing that sign: do you enjoy being angry? Do you not realize that the one thing you can be certain of when you're angry is that you're angry? You can't be certain that the other person is suffering at all from your anger. To be angry isn't in your self-interest. Ultimately, you have to be honest with yourself that it doesn't feel good. There is a narrative out there in the world right now. It's viewable on YouTube, hearable in the podcast realm, which, if you give it your attention and begin to understand its greater implications, will make it so you no longer feel so compelled to be angry. What I think the world needs less of is angry people. And if we're angry because we're seeing what isn't there, shouldn't we be talking about that? If it is true, wouldn't it be useful to know about it? Here's another quote. "The Holy Spirit, therefore, must begin his teaching by showing you what you can never learn. His message is not indirect, but he must introduce the simple truth into a thought system which has become so twisted and so complex you cannot see that it means nothing. He looks merely at its foundation and dismisses it. But you, who cannot undo what you have made, nor escape the heavy burden of its dullness that lies upon your mind, cannot see through it. It deceives you, because you choose to deceive yourself. Those who choose to be deceived will merely attack direct approaches, which would seem but to encroach upon deception and strike at it." End quote. Does it not make sense that you need to be at peace to see peace? Your anger shields you from your peace of mind. Is that what you want? Is that what you deserve? Once you finally admit that you can't experience peace without having peace inside you first, and that that is what you want above all else, you can turn your attention to the stories that will bring you peace. They are there waiting for you to see them. And your belief in them will be subject to the same snowball effect that your belief in the world has previously been. It's in forgiving the world you see. It is in the realm of our thoughts that we will change ourselves from angry people to loving people, and also change the world that we see. If we stop and think about it for a second, we often use the word see to describe the meaning we're giving to a situation. Let me tell you how I see it. In that phrase, we're implying that our thoughts are our perceptions, and that they are our own, not necessarily shared by other people. So we can infer that they're not absolute and that we know it. Thoughts and attention are linked, since gaining mastery of one's own thoughts is a matter of controlling one's own attention. It's about choosing which thoughts to hook onto and ruminate about. Because we do strengthen our beliefs in thoughts when we think them, even if we don't make them more absolutely true. Our thoughts are the way that we see the world, and that is what needs to change. Changing our behavior alone will not work in the end. We can act kind without changing our thoughts about the world. Many of us have tried this approach, but we also notice that if the kind behavior isn't backed up by truly loving thoughts, it sometimes doesn't feel so good. We begin to feel resentment because we're really just doing it to get some kindness in return, and it often isn't returned. We have to make a shift to a different paradigm entirely, and that requires change at the level of our thoughts and beliefs. What if you believed that all you need is love, and that love is all you are? Well, then you would already have all the love you need, right? Imagine how different the world would appear to you if that was your foundational belief. What would compel people to do hurtful things to one another in this scenario? This is how peace on earth, as it is in heaven, would come to us, through our inner peace. But I was talking about a sign that said you're not paying attention. So let's talk about attention some more. Attention is actually a choice, whereas thoughts are just thoughts. Attention can also be applied to the vision level and the thought level. Sometimes we choose to give our attention to doom and gloom on the internet, for instance. We also choose which thoughts to give attention to. We can hook onto a thought and ruminate about it for a few minutes. It's probably a thought we've ruminated on for several hours already. And do you know that you haven't become any more certain of the meaning of that thing which you have been ruminating about after those hours of thinking about it? It's frankly been wasted mental activity. You could just ask. Ask the Holy Spirit what it means. It will tell you. Or ask the other person what they meant, or what they were intending, because it is very likely that that's what you're ruminating about. The choice point is in what we give our attention to, both in the visual and the thought spheres. If you paid attention for a while to all the videos I've shared before this, you could see that I'm presenting a very logical argument. I'm not saying that there aren't many other logical arguments out there, but this one does make sense once you understand it, because it is based almost entirely on an extremely logical text, A Course in Miracles. Here's what it says in the beginning of a section that's called The Logic of Guiltlessness. Quote, "Yes, you are blessed indeed, but in this world you do not know it. Yet you have the means for learning it and seeing it quite clearly. The Holy Spirit uses logic as easily and as well as does the ego, except that his conclusions are not insane. They take a direction exactly opposite, pointing as clearly to heaven as the ego points to darkness and to death. We have followed much of the ego's logic and seen its logical conclusions. And having seen them, we have realized that they cannot be seen but in delusions, for there alone their seeming clearness seems to be clearly seen. Let us now turn away from them and follow the simple logic by which the Holy Spirit teaches you, the simple conclusions that speak for truth and only truth." End quote. It is your own sense of yourself as separate that is pointing at your guilt. That is the ego, and it's not your friend. God cannot even conceive of you as guilty. That is the last judgment that you need to accept for yourself. In the More section underneath this video, I have shared a link to Nuke Sanchez and Corrine Walson unpacking today's lesson from A Course in Miracles. It's a doozy. I recommend that you give it your full attention, and to start considering that there is another possible explanation for what is really going on out there. I believe their video was recorded 3 or 4 years ago, but it is even more timely today. Or you can give your attention to the doom and gloom again. It's your choice.